Hi everyone, this is Andy. Welcome to the video presentation of the Huddle projects and the natural project planning method. This video is really for everyone in donor operations. It is not only for the people who missed my presentations in early July, but it is also for the people who saw my presentations as well. The second half of this video is really going to focus on the natural project planning method, which is something that I didn't get a chance to talk about at the in-person Huddle projects. So welcome again, and basically the Huddle projects are going to be a platform for TDCs to show their creativity and talents at Huddles. People are going to be giving 10 to 15 minute presentations. This is going to be done on a volunteer basis, and the subjects will be of the TDC's choosing. And then this natural project planning method is really just to provide a framework for coming up with ideas and for developing independent projects. And so how I want to kick this off is by getting into a video from Dan Pink, which discusses motivation in the workplace, which is really the underlying concept behind the Huddle projects. So we're just going to start off here.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem. Some of you might have seen this before. It was created in 1945 by a psychologist named Carl Duncker. Carl Duncker has created this experiment that's used in a whole variety of experiments in behavioral science. And here's how it works. Suppose I'm the experimenter. I bring you into a room. I give you a candle, some thumbtacks, and some matches. And I say to you, your job is to attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Now, what would you do? Many people begin trying to thumbtack the candle to the wall. Doesn't work. Some people, and I saw somebody kind of make the motion over here, some people have a great idea where they light the match, melt the side of the candle, try to adhere it to the wall. It's an awesome idea, doesn't work. And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here. The key is to overcome what's called functional fixedness. You look at that box and you see it only as a receptacle for the tacks, but it can also have this other function as a platform for the candle. The candle problem. Now, I want to tell you about an experiment using the candle problem done by a scientist named Sam Glucksberg, who's now at Princeton University in the US. This shows the power of incentives. Here's what he did. He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages, for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. To the second group, he offered rewards. He said, if you're in the top 25% of the fastest times, you get $5. If you're the fastest of everyone we're testing here today, you get $20. Okay, now this is several years ago, adjusted for inflation. It's a decent sum of money for a few minutes of work. Okay, it's a nice motivator. Question, how much faster did this group solve the problem? Answer, it took them on average 3.5 minutes longer. 3.5 minutes longer. Now this makes no sense, right? I mean, I'm an American, I believe in free markets, that's not how it's supposed to work, right? If you want people to perform better, you reward them, right? Bonuses, commissions, their own reality show, incentivize them. That's how business works, but that's not happening here. You've got an incentive designed to sharpen thinking and accelerate creativity, and it does just the opposite. It dulls thinking and blocks creativity. And what's interesting about this experiment is that it's not an aberration. This has been replicated over and over and over again for nearly 40 years. These contingent motivators. If you do this, then you get that. Work in some circumstances, but for a lot of tasks, they actually either don't work or often they do harm. This is one of the most robust findings in social science and also one of the most ignored. Is that too many organizations are making their decisions, their policies about talent and people, based on assumptions that are outdated, unexamined, and rooted more in folklore than in science. And if we really want to get out of this economic mess, and if we really want high performance on those definitional tasks of the 21st century, the solution is not to do more of the wrong things, to entice people with a sweeter carrot or threaten them with a sharper stick. We need a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around three elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses. I want to talk today only about autonomy. In 20th century, we came up with this idea of management. Management did not emanate from nature. Okay? Management is it's not a tree, it's a television set. Okay? Somebody invented it. And it doesn't mean it's going to work forever. Management is great. Traditional notions of management are great if you want compliance. But if you want engagement, self-direction works better. Let me give you some examples of some kind of radical notions of self-direction. And what this means, you don't see a lot of it, but you see the first stirrings of something really interesting going on. Because what it means is, it means paying people adequately and fairly, absolutely. Getting the issue of money off the table, and then giving people lots of autonomy. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, looks like less than half. Atlassian is an Australian software company, and they do something incredibly cool. A few times a year, they tell their engineers, go for the next 24 hours and work on anything you want. As long as it's not part of your regular job. Work on anything you want. So the engineers use this time to come up with a cool patch of code, to come up with an elegant hack. Then they present all of these stuff that they've developed to their teammates, to the rest of the company, in this wild and woolly all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And then, being Australians, everybody has a beer. They call them FedEx days. Why? Because you have to deliver something overnight. It's not bad. It's a huge trademark violation, but it's pretty clever. That one day of intense autonomy has produced a whole array of software fixes that might never have existed. And it's worked so well that Atlassian has taken it to the next level with 20% time, done famously at Google, where engineers can spend 20% of their time working on anything they want. They have autonomy over their time, their task, their team, their technique. Okay? Radical amounts of autonomy. And at Google, as many of you know, about half of the new products in a typical year are birthed during that 20% time. Things like Gmail, Orchid, Google News.
So I hope you enjoyed that video, and one of the main things to take away is that donor operations at SiteLife is basically going to be moving towards an 8% time. This is going to be happening with the rolling out of the new 3.5 scheduling model. So really the Huddle projects is fitting into this. We're going to have 6 hours off the floor every other week. What are we actually going to be doing with that time? And it's a time that we're going to have a lot of creativity and independence, and hopefully we're going to be able to add value not only for ourselves but for the overall organization. So basically the Huddle projects, TDCs, are going to have the opportunity to develop and present 15-minute presentations on subjects of their choosing at Huddles. Again, as I mentioned, this is going to be a volunteer and ongoing basis. TDCs can present multiple times on different projects if desired. There is going to be a way to actually sign up on a calendar to present, and these projects are going to focus on 3 main themes that were covered in the video: mastery, purpose, and autonomy. So let's just take a minute to talk about those 3 themes and how they actually relate to donor operations. So first of all, mastery. People want to get good at their jobs and have opportunities to both demonstrate their excellence and strengthen their skills. And one of the best ways to learn and master something is to actually teach and present on it. So here are a few of the things that I think will relate to donor ops and mastery. And take a look at some of these example projects. So mastery really relates to how do we become great TDCs, everything that entails being a good donor coordinator, going from TDC 1 to TDC 2, improving our donation discussions, working with our stakeholders, etc. Let's take a look at purpose. People want to connect with something greater than themselves, and SightLife's mission perfectly lends itself to this higher goal. Not many organizations can say the same thing, and it can be hard, getting yourself pumped up about selling used cars or diapers, but SightLife really does have a mission that creates a profound impact for families and for transplant recipients. So it is something that can get lost, though, in the daily grind of operations. We can find ourselves losing connection to that purpose. So what are some examples of things that we could do, projects we could do to connect to SightLife's purpose? So something that stands out to me, for example, would be tracking all the steps in donation, following a cornea from death to post-transplant. And just imagine that you're a TDC who takes on that project. You are going to be connecting with a lot of people from other departments within SightLife. It's going to be an opportunity for you to get to know what cool things are happening at SightLife going on in other departments. And it's really going to give us a holistic picture about what does donation mean, both for donor families, for everybody involved, for transplant recipients. So sometimes we have this kind of fragmented view, and people in donor ops have expressed a little frustration that we feel isolated from the rest of the organization. So really, I see these purpose projects as really connecting us to the rest of the organization, as well as the overall mission of the organization. And let's take a look at autonomy. Autonomy is the catch-all category for creativity and innovation, for connecting to our own purposes and strengths. It is also the forgotten category. Many organizations do a good job at helping their employees achieve mastery. Organizations that do have a higher purpose like SightLife, they usually take advantage of helping connect their employees to the mission. They take every opportunity that presents. But very few organizations do a good job at helping individuals connect their own talents, purposes, and strengths to the overall mission of the organization. This burden is almost always with the employee. And what happens here is that you have very talented individuals potentially filling wrong roles in the organization. They could be happier and productive in a different role. And really, this is just a chance for people to explore their strengths and see how they can use their own talents to help SightLife end corneal blindness. And here are some examples. So for me, for example, I am really interested in organizational development. How do we create better organizations? What structures can we create to make better and more productive organizations? That's something that I'm passionate about and would like to contribute to SightLife. I put play the ukulele here, and I am not making a joke. Adding value to SightLife does not just mean creating more productivity and efficiency, but it's also contributing and creating the type of work environment that people actually want to show up to work every day. And even in very difficult times, as we have seen, TDCs have expressed that what really makes them stay at donor operations and what makes them show up every day is they're great colleagues. So how do we maintain this community and strengthen the community that we have? That is something that definitely adds value to both our department and the organization. And of course, there are tools that save TDC time and effort in coordinating, tools that maximize productivity and efficiency. And so the big takeaway from this Huddle projects and presentations, and I think this was best expressed by Austin, is that we hire a lot of really talented, incredibly smart people in donor operations. And if SightLife wants to achieve its goal of eliminating corneal blindness by 2040, we're going to need to utilize all the individual strengths and talents that people have. So additionally, I just want to say that I don't think TDC should feel intimidated by, presenting. And I think a lot of the materials for these Huddle projects are already there in existence at our fingertips. I just think of listening to a really great donation discussion. If you can listen and analyze that, you can potentially hit on mastery, you can hit on purpose, and you can also hit on autonomy. Maybe the TDC in that call really needed to use some creative problem solving and really went out of his or her way to make donation happen. So really the materials could already be there. So having said that, people who do want to take on projects, a little more in-depth projects, the second half of this video is now going to shift focus. We're actually going to be talking about a natural planning model. So this natural planning model is actually a concept that was developed by David Allen, author of Getting Things Done and kind of a productivity genius or guru, or however you like to say it. And we can just go straight in. Before we actually talk about the model, we can talk about why is it even important to plan for a project at all. So why plan at all? A planning model is helpful because people don't always like defining what it is that they're doing with all of their activity. That would be busy people. And idealists, such as myself, on the other hand, don't like putting their big ideas into concrete action steps. What is the unnatural planning model? This is probably something that you've seen a bunch at meetings. Maybe a manager or somebody else shouts out, "Does anyone have a good idea?"
Anyone? Anyone?
And it can be really hard to have a good idea without knowing what the purpose is behind the objective you're trying to achieve. It can also be really hard to have a good idea if someone puts you on the spot. It's like pulling a rabbit out of the hat. You generally need to have lots of ideas before you actually have a good one. And what's the reactive planning model? The reactive planning model is something that we're all probably pretty accustomed to doing, and this is when things get really busy and chaotic. We buckle down and we work hard. We stay busy, but we don't actually necessarily solve any problems. Sometimes we actually exacerbate the situation. And what I can think of, an example of this is when we're on the floor and it gets really busy. We stop writing case notes, and then we start doing redundant work. We forget something. Our stakeholders get angry with us, and now we have a TDC or a manager who's wasting an hour of our time talking to an angry funeral home director. And this is just an awful snowball effect. So one of the takeaways from planning is that sometimes you actually need to slow down in order to speed up. This is also differentiated between the concept of working on versus working in the business. In operations, we do a lot of working in the business. This is 24/7 making donation happen. whereas working on the business is things that really make things go more smoothly when we're working in the business. It's governance, it's the donation discussion meetings with Miranda, it is developing tools so that TDCs can coordinate more efficiently, productively, with less stress. So really these projects should be about working on the business. What can we do in behind the scenes to make the action of operations go more smoothly and more efficiently? And now, so let's actually take a look at this natural planning model. And what I'm going to do here is actually dissect the Huddle project idea that I came up with. How did I actually use the natural planning model to come up with the content in the Huddle project presentation and some of the other components to the Huddle project. So let's take a quick look at this. Here are the 5 phases of the natural project planning model. Purpose and principles. So you have to ask yourself, why are we doing this project? What guiding principles are driving our work? Vision and outcome. What will this project look like in the world if it's actually manifested? Do you have a vision, an image of what this will look like? Brainstorming. The best way to get a good idea is to get lots of ideas and make sure they're externalized, not in your head, but on a piece of paper or on some type of software or wherever, but you need to get them out of your head. Organization. This is identifying key pieces, either components, sequences, and priorities in the project. And then lastly is a next action step. So you need to identify a next concrete action step that you can take. This is something that I have struggled with in the past, so I really think it's a helpful tip. So let's just jump in here. So purpose behind the Huddle project. Why? And for me, this is important because human empowerment, autonomy, mastery, purpose, innovation, and creativity are all values and principles that I hold important. And really the why was to create a platform for TDC creativity and autonomy, to boost morale and increase affinity for the work that we do and our donor ops community, and to be able to make a different type of impact within our department, add variety to work. As well as to develop and showcase our diverse individual talents and skills. So I do want to say that not many people are actually going to come at a project effectively from just taking a value like, let's say I value quality or I value responsibility. The best way to come up with an idea for a project is to note tensions or problems that you experience on a daily basis. And every problem is a potential project. If you don't think it's a problem, then you probably don't think that there's anything to be done about it. Instead of using the word problem, some people like to say tension. A tension is a gap between a current reality and the way that things could be. I also think it's important to note that you don't have to project onto what other people might be feeling. You don't have to speak for the whole department when you think that something is a problem or a tension. It really just has to be a tension for you in your daily work that you're experiencing. In all likelihood, it's going to be something that's shared by a number of your colleagues, but you shouldn't think, oh, this isn't important unless everyone is feeling the same way. I would say, whatever you're experiencing is your tension that you can use a project to try to solve or try to alleviate. So what I saw in my everyday coordinating is that a lot of TDCs, including myself, were very stressed out. There is creative problem solving involved with coordination, but I didn't have enough independent projects to be working on a daily basis to really keep me 100% engaged. So I also thought that my colleagues would like something like this as well. So really developing these creative projects was solving this tension that I saw on the floor, that people are getting burned out, not enough autonomy, not enough creativity. So what can you actually do about that to move it to a space where things could be different? So having said that, let's talk about envisioning an outcome. So my ideal picture of what would happen if this Huddle project was successfully implemented is that TDCs are excited to come to work on a daily basis, morale is up, each TDC owns a project that they believe adds value, whether it be morale, culture, performance, efficiency to the donor operations department. Management also believes that this is a success because some of the TDC's projects are offering viable solutions to real tensions that the department experiences on a daily basis, such as sustainable growth, for example. I envision TDCs being widely recognized at our donor ops meeting, at staff's meeting. I'd love for these to impact the entire organization. I also think that through the Huddle projects, real professional development is going to be achieved. TDCs are going to practice their storytelling, their TED Talk ability, develop organizational and presentation skills, public speaking skills, etc. So I just see a result that's just positive in many different aspects and brings a lot of quality to the donor operations department. All right, brainstorming. The best idea or the best way to get a good idea is to have lots of ideas. And there are many different ways of brainstorming. I'm just going to go back here. I suggest that you use tools that you like. For me, for example, I really like using a whiteboard, washable markers and a whiteboard. I like having a big space, and then what I'll do is actually take a photo of the brainstorming map that I've done on the whiteboard, and then I'll convert that photo into a PDF. But you can use different types of software. There are lots of things on the internet. You can use plain old paper, but the main idea is to get these ideas out of your head and onto some recordable format, because the brain is great for having ideas, but it's horrible at keeping ideas. Quantity over quality. The more ideas, the better. So resist critiquing, analyzing, and organizing ideas during this phase. Take off your filter. And I know this is very hard to do because we're very good at being hypercritical. And asking open-ended questions is often a good way to start the brainstorming process, get you thinking about different possibilities. So let's just take a quick look at some examples of brainstorming that I actually did for the Huddle project. Okay. So let's shift toward the organization of a project. How do you actually organize and put something together? And you can often do this by components or parts, sequences, which follows a timeline, or priorities. Do the most important thing first. Just to give you an example of this in terms of the Huddle projects, if I divided it up into components, I could have thought about content, resources, time off the floor, implementation, follow-up, managerial involvement and support. So those things are all just parts, not in any specific order. I could have also thought about it sequentially. First I develop the content, then I ask management for time off the floor, then I focus on implementation, and lastly follow-up. Or I could have thought about it in terms of priorities, such as my number one priority is to secure time off the floor with management to get them to commit to this. The Huddle project is not going to work if we don't get time off the floor, so everything hinges on this anyway. So that's an example of having a number one priority, and then you can move on to your other priorities. Personally, I like to organize a project by components because I think sequences and priorities are too dependent on other people and external events happening. That can always throw off your sequence or can throw off your priorities. Components is less susceptible to that, although it still is, but you can really think about all the different things that you're going to need. Of course, it doesn't need to be a finalized list, but these are just some ways that you can think about organizing a project. Action steps. This is really important at the end when you've brainstormed. First of all, you come up with a principle, or you found a tension, you've envisioned an outcome, you've brainstormed, you're starting to organize your project, and then you ask yourself, what's the next concrete action step that I can take to move the project forward? And then a project is best described as an outcome involving at least 2 action steps. A project can be written as a true or false statement, such as garage is cleaned and organized. Garage is cleaned and organized is not an action step because it can't be something that's done in one fell swoop. There's a lot of different components or sequences that go into cleaning your garage. Also, when you write that on your to-do list, such as this, you can see that these to-do list so-called action items are all very vague. They're not even a specific action that you can take, except for meet with Austin. But then it's not even clear what we're meeting about. So writing a list like this is not always helpful. Here we have an example of a project with action steps, a list. And you'll see that in most of the action steps, there's actually a concrete thing that you can do. So at the bottom you see, send email to Julian to open the calendar up for TDCs to sign up for Huddle spots. Alright, so that does conclude the video, or that actually just concludes the natural planning model section. This is just the very final couple things that I want to touch upon in the video.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility. This is my gift, my curse.
So I definitely don't want this to be your curse, but we do have a responsibility here as TDCs. If we're going to be, given this great opportunity to have time off the floor, what are we going to be doing with this time? We need to make sure that we're not just, fooling around. That we're not just that this is something that could just be taken away from us because we're not doing a good job with the way that we're managing our time. So, and then these are just some ideas before choosing a project. Come up with a purpose and principles. Try to envision an outcome, how this project might help yourself or others in the department. I would encourage you to talk to at least 2 other colleagues to get feedback before getting in too deep on any given project. This is also an opportunity for collaboration. Autonomy does not mean that you can't ask for advice or help. And at the same time, consensus can kill fun. So if you're going to collaborate with somebody, you choose what advice to incorporate and what to ignore. And I suggest that if you are going to collaborate with a colleague on a big project, that you try to divide the project in a way that you autonomously own different sections of the project. And then if you are taking the opportunity to use your 6 hours off the floor for a project, you should be presenting at some point. And think about the scope of your project. If it's something too big, how do you break it down into manageable chunks? Also, don't wait to be perfect before presenting. This is impossible. Nobody wants to see someone who's perfect anyway. This is an iterative process, so we're all getting better all the time. Don't wait. Alright, and these are just some references and resources that I've used for this project. I'm actually going to be sending out a copy of the Prezi so that if you want to, you can watch the whole TED Talk video by Dan Pink. There's some other tools that I've used and another video that I've used that's really influenced me in the way that I think about organizations and organizational development. So I urge you to check that out. There's also a lot of these resources are soon going to be put on SharePoint, and you're going to have access to them. So we're going to have a whole wiki or a database of different Huddle projects. And then lastly, please do talk to your managers. If you're interested in creating a Huddle project, you can do this as soon as now. Also, try to talk to your managers. See if you can, if you want to, you can definitely try to schedule some time with me. I'll be happy to help you kind of work through some of the stages of project planning, or to ask you some open-ended questions initially to kind of get you thinking about what projects you might like, or what talents you have that you might want to explore. So really, I'd be happy to meet with you off the floor or even during a shift to talk about that. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how we in DonorOps can add value for ourselves and for SiteLife as a whole. Thank you so much.